Hey guys, this is Yoda. This will be my Vengeance Demon Hunter guide for Season 3 War Within Mythic Plus. In Season 2, Vengeance Demon Hunter was by far the best tank. It had the best survivability, the best self-healing. Its utility was like nigh required for a lot of dungeons. It was really good at meld skills, which were required. And the tier set gave it higher uptime on meta, so it was just like, it was eating really good in Season 2. In Season 3, it did not receive, so far, any of the traditional nerfs that like meta tanks are hit with at the end of the season. But we are losing the Season 2 tier set going to Season 3. The new tier sets, like the one for Felsguard and Eldrachi, are both pretty good for damage, but they do not offer any extra survivability. So we're a little bit less tanky going into the next season. However, you do still have, everything that you had last season except the tier set. The other thing that it's making it a little bit less required is that its utility, while it's still very good, it's not like hard required. For instance, in Prior to the Sacred Flame, people started going right. You can play like non-caster mobs now because they're nerfed. So you're not going to do like, you may not have to do, rather, like these 6 to 7 caster mob pulls where where it's basically just grip beam, silence, or FF. And also there are a lot more difficult like heal checks, in my opinion, that pick exactly 2 players. Which Vengeance Demon Hunter, you have darkness, but you don't have like the ways to save people that certain other tanks do, like Prop Paladin. I would say, while it is still very, very strong, potentially the best tank in the season, it's not like oppressively OP like it was in Season 2. Anyway, on to the talents. So this is going to be the default Eldrachi build, no bomb. If you want to play the same build in every single dungeon, then you can just play this and never change your talents and you'll probably be fine. There are a couple dungeons in the pool that do not require Sigil of Chains. I think Dawnbreaker and Streets. Chains is not very useful, so you could technically drop Chains for either Soul Furnace or Bulk Extraction, which is now playable. They did move this talent from here to here, or even Soulbeer if you really want to in those dungeons. Personally, I don't think... Well, if you were going to play Eldrachi in those dungeons, you would do that, but... The other thing new this season is that Felsguard is now way more viable to play. So we'll go into show the Felsguard build here. The main problems that Felsguard has is that it requires a lot of talents. Like every time you push Feldev, you get 2 charges of Demon Surge. And then, if you take Dark Glare Boon, then you get way more Feldevs, and it becomes, you can be like a little bit more loose with the cooldown. And without it, you basically have to push it every 40 seconds or it won't line up with meta, so it really doesn't work out well. And also, you really, really need to take Spirit Bomb or you do no damage as Felsguard, because Spirit Bomb also procs Demon Surge. So, if we look at the Eldrachi build, we basically... I think taking Dark Glare Boon is like, it's not going to happen. Like, you need to drop either Cheat Death, Illuminated Sigils, or Soul Crush, and all 3 of those talents are hard mandatory, in my opinion, in high keys. So Dark Glare Boon is probably not going to happen, but you can get Spirit Bomb if you drop Sigil of Chains. So in those 2 dungeons that I mentioned, Streets and Halls, you can drop... Or it's not Halls, sorry. Streets and Dawnbreaker. Sigil of Chains is not super necessary, so you could potentially go Spirit Bomb and play play Felsguard. You can also technically drop Chains of Anger, maybe, in some keys for Spirit Bomb, and then it'll be okay. I think like maybe Gambit might be one of the dungeons where that is potentially a move, but I wouldn't drop Chains in Gambit, so if you're thinking about dropping Chains, don't do that in Gambit. I would only do that in Dawnbreaker and Streets, as we mentioned. Anyway, so if you are willing to drop Chains, then you could technically play Spirit Bomb. What are the differences between the 2? So Felsguard basically is really good for damage. If you look at your tier set, you are going to do 20% more Soul Cleave damage. So your single target is extremely good as Felsguard. It's like much, much higher than Eldrachi. And also entering Demon form now induces a Demon Surge. So your burst windows are much stronger because you get 1 extra Demon Surge at the start every time. And they also shatter a fragment that grants 20% increased damage. So they're 20% stronger, plus you also get the extra Demon Surge. So all your burst windows are crazy strong as Felsguard. Also, there is a really strong trinket this season called Eras's Ritual Forge. I don't know if they're going to nerf it, but it is like Omega overtuned for an on-use trinket, and it is 2 minutes, and it does have crit. So if there is a season to play Felsguard, it's definitely this one. But like I said, in most dungeons, you don't really have the talent points to do it, because if you want to take Sigil of Chains, you basically have to drop Chains of Anger, and then your Silent Sigil is only 2 seconds. Or you could drop Extended Spikes, and then you can't push Spikes in meta, or run out of spikes, and then you'll probably die. So it's really awkward to get the talent points, but when you can make it work, it is potentially worth it. The damage output is very good. The main weaknesses, I would say, are, number 1, you kind of do have to meta off cooldown. Otherwise, you're going to miss out on a lot of damage. If you have scheduled, like, if you basically have the dungeon all scripted out and you know exactly when you're going to meta anyway, and it all works out properly for Felskard, then that's fine. But if you're like first time progging the dungeon, or maybe you're pugging, then, you know, that could get really awkward if meta comes up, the pack is like at half health, and the next pull is really hard. Like, what are you going to do? You basically just have to sit there not metaing, right? Whereas as Eldrachi, you could just sit there building stacks, then you'd be even stronger for the next pull while having meta up. The other thing is, Felskard is technically, I think, passively tankier. You have worse self-sustain, but the two healers that are really good so far on PTR, which are Resto Druid and Dispriest, have really good like passive tank healing. So the self-sustain is actually not that necessary from Eldrachi, and you do have a lot of passive tankiness nodes. They give Set Fire to the Pain, 5% stagger, randomly 8% more agility outside demon form, and I believe you also have 20% increased armor and 5% increased max health outside demon form, so you're a lot less likely to get one shot as Felskard. You just can't heal yourself as much. Anyway, just wanted to throw that out there. I believe this is probably playable in Dawnbreaker and Streets for a damage gain. But if you want to just play the same build in every single dungeon, I highly recommend Eldrachi no bomb build. Everyone knows how to play it pretty much that played in Season 2. It's very straightforward. You don't even need to think about Spirit Bomb. And there also are a couple choice nodes even if you do decide to play this build, or this like hero tree. So the first choice node is Focus Cleave versus Soulmonger. So Focus Cleave, it represents a pretty big damage gain on single target, like maybe 5-ish%. And Soulmonger, while it will show up like really big on your healing meter, it basically is like, at best, it's like a 10% health buffer in really hard pulls. So if you're having trouble surviving, this is one change that you can make, because at the end of the day, tank damage is very, very low nowadays. So losing a little bit of tank damage in exchange for some amount of survivability, you know, not like the 30% that you might think you're getting, but some amount that is greater than 0. Some amount of tank survivability that is greater than 0 in exchange for a little bit of single target, I think is definitely fine if you're having trouble surviving or the key is just really hard. Also, as we mentioned, this node got moved. It used to be here, which made it basically untakeable. You can technically drop chains in those 2 dungeons, or maybe another dungeon for it if you want, or Chains of Anger. Would not recommend dropping Chains of Anger. Bulk Extraction in particular is quite good this season because your tier set, which we will now read. Your tier set basically says it makes your Reaver's Glaive much more powerful. Whenever throw your Reaver's Glaive, you basically now have an extra access to Fury of the Eldrachi, which will hit 12 times instead of 6. And it also increases the damage of all of your physical damage, which Fury of the Eldrachi is. So every Fury of the Eldrachi is hitting way harder. It's a much like higher proportion of your damage. So getting more glaives out is pretty good. So bulk extraction does help a little bit with that. It's a quarter of a glaive every minute, assuming you're in AoE. If you're very comfortable playing without extended spikes, you can also technically drop this as Eldrachi. I would say you cannot drop this as Felskard, because as Felskard, you're not generating as many souls usually, because you're playing a Frailty rotation, which means you're not triggering Feed the Demon as much. But as Eldrachi, you are definitely triggering Feed the Demon way more, especially if you play bulk extraction. So if you are comfortable in the dungeon, you can also technically drop extended spikes for either Soul Furnace or bulk extraction. There are some builds that play without Last Resort and with Cycle of Binding, or potentially you could play Felskard without Last Resort, but I think those are all troll. There is technically a cheat death trinket in this season called All-Devouring Nucleus, but I think this trinket is really, really bad, and I would rather play with Last Resort and a real trinket than, even as Felskard, than drop Last Resort and play this trinket. It's such a large damage loss, and also the cheat effect is very poor. You can just die through it, and also it's bugged right now, so if you die like from 60 like to a big hit and then it procs and heals you above 80, you just die when the debuff runs out. So yeah, it's also bugged and it's also just really bad. I would suggest not playing that as Demon Hunter and playing Last Resort instead. If the Keystone is resilient, maybe you could consider playing Dark Lair as Felskard, but if it is not, I would seriously recommend playing Last Resort in every single key. Alright, on the left we have a couple choices. So basically it's this point, I have it in Demon Muzzle. You can also put it in Short Darkness, you can put it in Long Darkness, and you can technically drop Internal Struggle, but I really would not do this. It's pretty big damage loss. Only drop it if you really need Demon Muzzle and you really need Pitch Black, then you can drop it. But usually this talent gets overlooked. It represents like 2%-ish damage and quite a bit of, and a small amount, I wouldn't say quite a bit, small amount of survivability, so I wouldn't drop it. Don't drop this as Eldrachi, but you can drop it as Felskard. And if you need Purge, then it's usually this point that gets dropped for it. You can technically drop Vengeful, but I don't like doing that. And you also can technically drop I guess if you're playing Fellsguard, you could drop Chaos Fragments for Purge. But yeah, that's usually most of the changes that you would possibly make on the left side. On the right side, we already went over it. The only thing we haven't covered is Illuminated Sigils versus Down in Flames. So this is two different playstyles. And they're both good for different dungeons. Illuminated Sigils basically gives you stronger passive parry. And it is worth a little bit more damage, I would say, even in the new season than Down in Flames. But, you know, you can't parry everything. There are a lot of effects in this game that cannot be parried. Or if you just don't want to deal with parry RNG as much, then Down in Flame gives you a lot better, like, cooldown choices that you can make. Like, you have a lot more control over your brands. Like, you can just use it and then the other one's cooling down. You don't have to just send it off cooldown or you lose infinite value from both damage and survivability. You can let it charge up, like, 2 of them for a hard pull. Or if it's just like a really hard boss that has a bunch of tank busters that you need to use Down in Flames for, then having the shorter cooldown and 2 charges can be really useful for that too. So far in the dungeon pool, I'm gonna make some guesses right now. I would think Down in Flames is potentially better in Dawnbreaker and Gambit. Gambit for sure because of the first boss pull. Dawnbreaker, and I think not Streets. Maybe Streets, probably not Streets. Actually, I think it is not better. I think Down in Flames is actually better in Streets by a lot. So I would play Down in Flames in both Tazveshes, Dawnbreaker, and that might be it. Also, as Fellsguard, you gain a lot more damage by playing by playing Illuminated Sigils. But I also kind of prefer Down in Flames whenever I'm playing Fellsguard, mainly because you can only, in my eyes, play Fellsguard in Dawnbreaker and Streets, and Down in Flames I think is better in those 2 dungeons. For Prior to the Sacred Flame, in Season 2, I actually did end up playing Illuminated Sigils, but most DHs and me for most of the season played Down in Flames here. I'm not quite sure what is going to end up being better next season, but, you know, feel free to try both out. Yeah, this is a choice node, and it actually changes your gameplay quite a bit which one you take. So do look into that and test it out for yourself. I'm not going to make any sweeping announcements, but yeah. All right, for the stats, we want haste up to 21,000. I think I'm in like unscaled gear right now, so I will have 21,000 when I get scaled. Up to about 22,000. That makes your Immolation Ore about an 11-second cooldown, and it should be enough to cover having 100% spikes uptime with with extended spikes and Feed the Demon. After that, I would say you kind of want to balance between crit and verse. So this is a topic of discussion for a lot of demon hunters. So basically, crit gives you a lot more parry. Against anything you can parry, crit is better because you'll just, you know, take less damage from not getting meleeed as much. But there are a lot of effects in this game that cannot be parried. For instance, in the Dawnbreaker, recently, they made, we can just look here, recently they made Tainted Slash from the commanders unparryable. So now this ability, you know, crit is completely useless against, and it applies a bleed, so verse is the only way to really mitigate this, or like from stats. Not only are you taking less damage, it also increases your self-healing that you can use to combat the bleed. So basically, crit is really useful against everything that you can parry. It's, in fact, is your best stat. But you cannot parry everything, so against things that you cannot parry, verse is superior. Which is why I take a mix between crit and verse. Probably a little bit more crit than verse, but, you know, don't just say, oh yeah, everyone goes crit haste, ignore verse. That's wrong. You should definitely play a little bit of verse. The stat that you can't ignore, however, is mastery. Mastery was over simming a little for a time at the beginning of season 2, but that got fixed, and now mastery is known to be terrible, except maybe a little bit okay for raid parsing. But also on the season 3 PTR, mastery got nerfed again, so it is basically just complete trash for keys. You, I think, need to take it on the boots for your Reshi wraps, and I believe it's on a couple tier pieces that are required, but other than that, stay the hell away from mastery. Do not take it at all. All right, for your trinkets. In my opinion, these are the 2 best trinkets. They are both, or this one is from the raid. It is very similar to Eye of Kazan from last season, except that both effects are actually useful for Demon Hunter. Eye of Kazan, I would say, was mostly a damage trinket. This one is a damage trinket, and also a survivability trinket. Basically, every 15 seconds when you take damage, it can proc. And it does damage back to the enemies, and it shields you for a little bit. The shield is not really that useful, but the damage is a lot of damage. Usually, I would say it's... Let me see if I have a log. Okay, I don't have a log of it, but it's usually like about over 10% single target, and between 5 and 10 on overall, which is really good for a trinket, even if it has no main stat. And it also does have crit, which is a nice bonus. The only thing is, outside of combat, you start dropping stacks, so do make sure you're like chaining properly to keep stacks. Very similar to Eye of Kazan from last season. I would say this trinket is better than Eye of Kazan was, which is a crazy thing to say about a trinket, but it is really good. Much better than I originally gave it credit for. The other trinket I would play is just the passive improvised Euphorian Pacemaker. Just a heavily budgeted crit stat stick. Technically, Araz's Ritual Forge is over budgeted this season, so you could also play Araz's over Pacemaker even as Eldrachi. If you are playing Felsguard, then Araz's is actually now your best trinket, since it's a 2-minute on use and it's over budgeted and it gives you agility that's like basically is stronger in the first part of your burst, which is all Felsguard is. It's like super front loaded. So this trinket, you could play this trinket over Pacemaker even as Eldrachi because it's overtuned. But as Felsguard, this is going to be by far your best trinket. Some other options in the pool, if you don't want to raid, are Olia's Secret Technique. You can just use it on ally, give yourself anything except Mastery, and it's already going to be good. And Ring and Ritual Mud as Felsguard can be very good. It is a big damage loss because it does very low damage and doesn't have main stats on it, but it does trigger the Absorb cooldown reduction from Set Fire to the Pain. So as Felsguard, this trinket is pretty good. As Eldrachi, I probably wouldn't play it in any dungeon. Maybe if you're really struggling with like Floodgate or Priory, you could consider it. But outside of that, I wouldn't play it. I would just play the passive trinkets. And again, this Cheat Death trinket is in the game, but I highly recommend not playing it as Vengeance Demon Hunter. I think the only tank spec that actually wants to potentially use it is Prot Paladin, since VDH already has a Cheat Death, and this trinket is buggy and complete trash. So I would not equip it as a Vengeance Demon. I think those are basically the trinkets you want. If you raid, then these are probably your two best. If you don't raid, then you're probably playing Pacemaker. And Celia's Tome is also in the game. Don't have it in my bags right now, but that trinket, in my opinion, is going to be worse than Brand. And on top of that, the main problem with Tome is that the uptime on Radiance, which is the crit effect, is relatively lower than you would want it to be. Like on Sims, I think it's like 100%, which is why it's really good on Sim. And also in the raid, the uptime can be pretty close to 100%. And I think in Dawnbreaker, your uptime is pretty good too, randomly. Random caveat, but in most dungeons, your uptime on Radiance is going to be pretty low because mobs hitting you basically gives you too many stacks, and then you get stuck on defense mode without being able to switch out. So Tome, I think, is probably not as good as it was last season, especially when the trinkets this season are better than they were last season. And Tome was not even played in endgame last season anyway. But at the start of the season, I would say it is pretty good. Also worth noting, this codex right now is bugged on PTR. It says it should reflect 10% of incoming damage up to a maximum of 1.9 million per blow. What it actually does is it reflects 1.9 million total, and then it goes away. If they ever fix that, then this trinket is going to be the best trinket in the game for every tank. But it's currently bugged, so don't use it. If it does get fixed though, obviously use it. All right, embellishments. So I believe most sources are recommending Adrenal Surge Clasp. However, I have never thought that Adrenal Surge Clasp is very good. Firstly, the first thing to know about embellishments is that they don't matter. All of them are worth sub 1%, so the difference between them is like sub 0.1%, so it really doesn't matter which one you play. I am a big fan of Symbiosis because it gives you Verse, and I like Verse as a stat. Last season also, Symbiosis could proc and trigger your tier set. That's not really true anymore. But yeah, Symbiosis just gives you Verse. Adrenal Surge Class gives you main stat, which is like good for damage, but useless defensively, basically. Which is why I played Symbiosis. Another decent option is Dawn Thread or Dust Thread. But early season, generally, unless you have access to a mythic weapon, like either you're a raider and you know you're going to get the drop, or you get the item if it drops, or if you just get lucky in your vault, generally you're not going to have a mythic weapon other than that, so crafting one is really good. And if you do craft one, I would definitely put Symbiosis on it, and then put your other crafting slot should probably be Writhing Armor Band. This season we are also getting Reshi Wraps, legendary. Do wear it, it is very good. It originally wasn't very good when it first came out, but it's been buffed a lot, so definitely worth wearing. Okay, so now we're going to get into the rotational gameplay. VDH, we'll talk about offensive stuff first. We'll start with Felsguard. So this Felsguard, it's really important that you proc all the demon surges you have. So we'll do a quick demo here. We're going to put Sigil of Flame and Sigil of Spite on the Hunt on cooldown first, and Immolation Aura. Then we're going to apply Fiery Brand, and then Araz's push Feldev. You have to walk over your soul right now because it's bugged. Then proc both demon surges. And then remeta, proc all the Demon Surges here. You want to proc them quickly because of Eras's. I think I actually missed the Demon Surge there on the Feldev. But anyway, after that, you want to be doing a Fury Dump rotation, which means you're spending both Fractures at a time, and then just pushing Soul Cleave until you can't push anymore. You also want to be pushing Sigil of Flame, Immolation Aura, and Fellblade off cooldown, since you care about your Fury, so we're building to full. Then we're just spamming Soul Cleave. And that's pretty much it. Push Feldev when it comes up, use Brand when you need it. There is a small caveat with this Season's Tier set, so Immolation Aura makes your Soul Cleave deal 20% more damage. So when your Immolation Aura has downtime, which outside of Lust happens a little bit, like you can see it lasts for 7 seconds, 10-second cooldown. You don't want to be wasting Soul Cleaves during that. You can push Fracture when Immolation Aura is down, basically, instead of Soul Cleave. Next we'll talk about Eldrachi. Because Eldrachi, you don't really have a crazy opener. Your goal is to keep up this buff as much as you can. Thrill of the Fight. The second part, the first part doesn't really matter. The second part, damage and healing increased by 15%. So that triggers whenever you do your Reaver's Glaive combo, which we'll demo here. We hunt, and then you get a Reaver's Glaive available. Throw the Reaver's Glaive, and you're almost always going to want to Fracture first. In single target, technically, I think sometimes you can Soul Cleave first, but generally, I would say just Fracture first. You're not going to lose too much, even if you always do that on single target. And then whenever I Soul Cleave, you're going to see it procs this buff. It does 12 slashes around me, which does a lot of damage for the Eldrachi. And it procs this buff, Thrill of the Fight. So our goal was to keep as high uptime as possible on this buff, so we can get stacks on this by either casting the Hunt or by collecting 20 souls. Also, if your Glaive is available, you do not want to cast the Hunt because you'll just override the Glaive. You basically waste 20 stacks. And also, rotationally, we no longer care about Fury. We want to be generating as many souls as possible, so that means you will overcap Fury a lot. You can see here I'm at 120 Fury, but I'm still going to Fracture twice just to generate as many souls as possible, to throw more Reaver's Glaive, to cast more Fury Eldrachi more times, and as such, keep higher uptime on Thrill of the Fight. In Season 2, you didn't necessarily have to play... It was less important to play this way because you had a tier set that would occasionally reset the Hunt randomly. So if you were like pooling too many stacks and you like had a Glaive available and you got Hunt back, then sometimes you would not be able to use the Hunt immediately, and then you're like, if you got another proc, that would override your Hunt, and then your Hunt would be off. Your Hunt would not be on cooldown to be reset. So that was basically a disaster. So you didn't really want to play that way in Season 2, but in Season 3, you know, there's no more Hunt resets, so you actually do want to play that way. Basically, only throw Reaver's Glaive if this buff has like 3 seconds or less, to maintain as high uptime as possible. There's another thing also to consider. You can technically back-to-back throw Glaives under 2 conditions. Number 1, if you're doing AoE and then you're about to be in a single target boss, you can technically throw Glaives to like back-to-back to pad on the AoE before it dies. Also, the same thing applies to like ad phases on bosses. If the ads are going to die, it can be pretty good to get like multiple Glaives up on the ads. You may see that as pad, but actually, thanks to the Wounded Quarry talent, that might actually be more single target damage to the boss just by getting more funnel damage out of your Fear of the Eldrachis. So those are the 2 times you would actually throw them back to back. But generally, you do not want to be throwing them back to back. You just want to be maintaining uptime on Thrill of the Fight as much as possible. Other than that, and generating as many souls as possible, you're basically just playing the same VDH as everyone else. Alright, so that is the rotational guide for Eldrachi. Defensively, there are a couple things you need to know. So, number 1, if you're playing Illuminated Sigils, you can technically dump all your Sigil of Flames during Fiery Brand, but it's a little bit better, in my opinion, defensively, to like spread them out to maintain as high uptime as possible on the parry. Whether you use it offensively or defensively, you know, it kind of depends what you want to do, but generally I would say play more for the parry rather than for the damage, except on single target. Also, Immolation Aura may not look like a big cooldown, but it is actually a really big cooldown because it generates 5 souls from Fallout, and you also have this talent, Infernal Armor. So when your Immolation Aura is down and you don't have Meta or Brand, that's when you're most vulnerable as Eldrachi. Also, in your opener, you are also very vulnerable because you don't have any stacks of Painbringer and you don't have any stacks of Soul Crush Frailty. So it is kind of important to use cooldowns, like overlap cooldowns in the opener. So basically, if you're starting the pull, right, you would just start with Brand and then Feldev immediately. Then once you're set in the pull, you no longer want to be overlapping these. Basically, you'll wait for this brand to fall off. As soon as this brand falls off, technically, you could either use your next brand or meta. Generally, it's better to use a cooldown that doesn't have charges first, so you would use meta. And then once your meta's over, you can brand again. Then once that brand's over, you can Feldev, etc. That's the playstyle with Down in Flames. If you're playing Illuminated Sigils, then it looks more like meta plus brand on pull into like just spikes plus sigil of flame and hope that you can stay alive. If the pull is very, very difficult, you can ask for PS or externals at that point. But generally, don't use anything other than your own stuff in the opener. If you don't have Firebrand or Feldev in the opener, you can also ask for externals on pull. There is quite a bit more to VDH defensive play. Be sure to check out the other videos on the channel. Most of them are from Season 2, but all of them basically still apply to the same VDH since nothing really changed going to Season 3. So be sure to check those out if you have more questions defensively. Offensively, though, some things have changed, so I would not really follow the other things over there. As far as gathering packs goes, so there were previously a lot of aggro bugs with VDH that have been fixed. The major one before was that Sigil of Flame and Reaver's Glaive and many other skills, actually, if they were the first skills to aggro a mob that was not in combat with you, then they would not generate any aggro. That bug has been fixed. The bug that has not been fixed is that if someone else aggroes the pack, like by face pulling it, and then you use your abilities, sometimes they don't generate aggro. So what was happening before is you were getting the wombo combo, like you would pull a pack with Throw Glaive or Reaver's Glaive, and then that wouldn't generate aggro, so it would count as face pulling the pack, and then you'd use another skill, but then that skill would bug out because that pack was technically face pulled, and then that skill wouldn't generate aggro either, and then it was just a complete disaster from there. Since the first part has been fixed, as long as no one face pulls, it's usually kind of chill on gather. Generally, my technique would be to, like, let's say I want to gather this pack, like this, the really hard one, a really hard gather, right? This one, these three, and these two, right? So you would Reaver's Glaive the furthest pack, and then you can also hunt the close one into cancel the hunt's movement, and then just jump on this pack and Feldev, right? To get aggro. Also, very important to note, Feldev basically is your best tool for getting aggro when things are running in. So you want to tag packs that are far away first, have them run in, and then aggro the close pack, and then like Feldev all of it together. What you don't want to do is like run straight in face first into the close pack, and then like start using aggro generating skills while this pack is hitting you. That's a really good way to get one shot on pull, or use your Feldev too early so you don't have it for aggro. You definitely want to pull the further packs first when possible. That is basically how you gather packs. We cover defense. Next we'll cover utility. So one of Vengeance Demon Hunter's biggest like boons is that you have a lot of AoE stops. You can see here we have Chaos Nova, Sigil of Silence, Sigil of Misery, and Sigil of Chains. They're all AoE stops. If you are paired with a Moonkin, then Sigil of Chains is also really good at setting up their Solar Beam. Generally, it's going to look like you start the pull, everyone kicks, and then you grip into Beam. After Beam, you can use your Chaos Nova into Silence, and then use other AoE stops as a baseline sort of AoE stop rotation. Obviously, you know, there are going to be many different compositions of caster mobs that require a certain like order of AoE stops that's going to change every dungeon, which is kind of what makes Mythic Plus interesting. But as a baseline, that is basically what you can do. Another thing you have is Sigil of Misery skips. So if you Sigil of Misery a pack and then run past it, your whole group can run past it. Like, let's say we're skipping this guy, right? I can, if he's not imprisonable, I can Sigil of Misery him and then run through. Everyone else runs through. Once they're all through, you can push Shadow Meld, and that mob will basically reset, and you've effectively skipped him. Also, we have Darkness. Don't forget that Darkness can be used for yourself. It says 15%. It's actually 30% in Mythic Plus, so it's not really good against like one-shots, obviously, because you basically have a 30% chance to die. But if you're worried about like 10 melees hitting you and you not parrying enough of them, then Darkness is like another layer of RNG protection that you can use for yourself, basically as a cooldown. In those situations, it is also very useful in certain dungeons, especially Floodgate, when your group is taking a lot of damage. And that is mostly it. Another cool trick, by the way, for the hunt, since we demoed it earlier, you can cancel your movement. So I'm going to hunt from far away on this training dummy and then cancel it, which is really useful for gathering. So I'm going to hunt and then self-infernal jump to cancel it. So the reason you would do this is if you want to aggro a pack from far away. Remember I said it's very good to pull the furthest pack first. Well, Hunt has a 50-yard range. So other than Reaver's Glaive, it's actually your highest range ability. So technically you can like start at the entrance of the dungeon, hunt one pack, cancel it, and then Reaver's Glaive like another pack. Then these 2 packs are 50 yards away, but they're still running to you as a gather. Obviously, you cannot do the Reaver's Glaive part as Fellsguard, so you kind of have to like use your 40-yard glaive instead. But yeah, that is a pretty useful setup. Anyway, that is going to be it for the VDH guide. Really excited to play some VDH in Season 3. Thank you all for watching. Peace out.